Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of your safety and your own personal safety, we ask that you keep a close watch on your carry-ons and personal belongings.
Welcome to the AeroExploration Podcast, where aviation's past, present, and future meet. We explore the stories that build aviation history, take you inside the industry today, and uncover the career paths and innovations keeping the industry in motion. We go behind the scenes, into the cockpit, and onto the ramp, meeting the people and discovering the places that define aviation. If it's part of the flying world, you'll find it here. This is AeroExploration.
Welcome back, everyone, to AeroExploration. My name is Jim, and I'm your host. And on this episode, we're going to talk about one of the biggest headaches in aviation right now. And it's not what you think it is. So as I set this episode up, I want you to think about some of the things that are big headaches for you in aviation right now. Is it fuel prices? Is it complexity of maintenance? Could it be A&P availability? Or could it be examiner availability? I realize as I start listening to these that all of these are a bit of a headache in aviation right now. But one of the big things I've heard from people within my circle is there's a hangar shortage. There's plenty of people who have their own aircraft and rent hangars or find options for where they can put them, whether it's a tie-down spot at their local airport or something like that. But there is, in fact, a shortage of hangars. There's a lot of airports that just aren't building new ones. And the ones that are there are maybe owned by somebody else who has it full to the rafters with junk, or there's expensive rental situations. So on this episode, I'm going to give you a bit of a guide and a playbook, as it were, on how to get yourself into a hangar from finding one all the way to the dotted line. So this episode's topic was actually posed to me recently by someone at my local airport who was familiar with myself and my partner buying our hangar. He and his prospective partner had a lot of really good questions, and he had kind of jokingly said, hey, this would be a fun podcast episode. Well, I thought about it, and he's not entirely wrong, because as I looked back at our process for getting into our hangar, it is complex, and there is a lot of moving pieces that are at play, and it's not as simple as just finding a hangar and handshake deal like it may have been way back in the golden days of aviation. There are a lot of things that have to be considered. So what we'll actually cover here is we're going to talk about how to hunt for a hangar in the first place, whether you should buy it alone or do it with a partner, and a lot of the financial and legal nuances that you might want to consider that might become a nightmare if you don't completely understand what you're getting into. All right, so before we go any further, just a quick disclaimer. This podcast episode is for information purposes only and should not be considered legal or tax guidance. I am neither one of those things. I'm just a guy who has been through the process of purchasing a hangar with my partnership, and I wanted to share some of that insight with all of you. So it is really important to consult with a qualified attorney or tax professional to help you address your specific situation and any of those nuances that might pop up that aren't answered within this episode. All right, so the first step, the hunt. Your first problem here is pretty simple. That latest and greatest hangar for sale is not always easy to find. You're not going to find them on Zillow, and you won't always see a for sale sign sticking out on the taxiway. So that means finding one means you have to think less like a home buyer and more like a detective. Some problems I hear in my circles a lot is that the waiting list at their airport is years long. So this is where you have to get a little bit more proactive. So the first step of that some might not always want to hear is you have to think a little bit wider scale than just your current home airport. That means call every single airport in driving radius that you can live with and put your name on that waiting list as well. Do it today. Don't wait until tomorrow. Call those airports up and get your names on lists if they're available. Even if they're telling you that that list is 5 years long, just get on it. At least you're there. That can be a safety net for you. The next thing to consider is sometimes your fixed base operators, where your fuel's at and things like that, are not always the same people as that front office administration of the airport manager. And a lot of times those FBOs can be the heart of your airport. They handle fuel, they handle maintenance, and they know just about everyone. They will also manage their own hangar rows, and they'll know who might be thinking about selling or subletting. So walk in, build some contacts there, say hello, and tell them what you need, and build that relationship. Even if they don't have a hangar for you, they could be a really good source of intel as they have their ears to the ground at your airport. But here's another really important secret. Just talk to people. Network at your airport, join your local EAA chapter, go to their meetings, don't just sign up and hope for the best. Go to their pancake breakfast and start making those relationships by talking to other pilots. This is a term you hear a lot on this podcast, but make those non-transactional relationships and networking opportunities. It's not just all about, I'm going to get into a hangar. That's not going to get you anywhere. You have to actually invest some time in these relationships. Even if your airport has one of those waiting lists, the person who knows that a hangar is about to open up isn't always the airport manager telling you it's going to be 3 years from now. It's that guy who's thinking about retiring or the woman whose partner is moving out. These are the kind of deals that are never listed publicly. They happen way before anyone can even think about posting them because someone knows someone who knows someone else who's looking for a hangar. So if you've got that network already in place because you've built it at your airport, you're going to hear about those opportunities a lot quicker than waiting around on a waiting list. So get involved at the airport you want to be at. The other perk about being at the airport and just being engaged and involved is when those rare opportunities pop up that someone does post a sign on the outside of their hangar, you're going to see it because you're there and you're engaged, or one of your people in your network will see it because they're there and they're engaged. So honestly, that's how our hangar came about. Is my partner is at the airport often, and she came across this hangar as she was driving around to go visit somebody else, and the sign was on the door and she made contact. And in the time that we had been talking to see if we even wanted to do this, they received several other phone calls from word of mouth at the airport saying that they were interested in the hangar. You got to be on top of things like that. And the best way to do that is just being present and making connections. All right, now comes the big decision. You found your hangar, and now you're going to hit a fork in the road, and it's a big one. Do you go this on your own, or do you team up with a partner or a group of partners to make this happen? This decision is going to define a whole lot about your experience as an owner, so we should break it down a little bit. So the first option, obviously, is sole ownership. The obvious upside here is total control of how things will go in your hangar. It's your space. You pick the layout. You pick any remodeling you want to do, what tools you might buy. And if you decide that you want to leave a plane in a million pieces for 6 months, there will be no one there to stop you. There's also no arguments about shared bills, who's going to take what parts. It's all on you. And for many pilots, that freedom is a dream. The downside, though, is just as big. Again, you're in total control. You carry 100% of those costs. And that's not just your purchase price. You need to think about property taxes, insurance, utilities, every single repair that needs to be done. Your door motor stops working. You have a leaky roof. It's all on you. For many people, that is too much to take on by themselves. So they look the avenue of a partnership. And this is the direction that me and my partners went, obviously. The immediate win here is the financial one. You are taking the cost of this hangar, both the purchase price as well as all those other expenses I talked about, and you're splitting them 2, 3, 4 ways depending on what your ownership group looks like. So again, for me, this made hangar ownership a heck of a lot more feasible than if I was just to try to do this by myself. The other really nice aspect of this is that you get to share the workload of managing the hangar with others. So again, whether this is a remodeling project or working through the financials, if you each take a little piece of it, it's a lot more manageable. So I, for example, will take on working through the budget and things like that, and I've got partners that take on other aspects of the hangar operations, going over and checking it, doing the maintenance, things like that. So it's a good team dynamic right now of how we divide those different tasks. And now comes a potential con, and that is partners can add complexity and they can cause for some serious drama. It doesn't matter how good of friends you are at this point. This isn't just a few friends getting together to share a space. You are entering a formal business relationship, and if you go this route, you have to treat it like that. This part, in my opinion, is non-negotiable, and I have great partners that would also insist upon this. You really have to focus here on having a rock-solid foundation, and that includes having professionally drafted agreements. I can't stress this enough here. An aviation small business or other type of attorney that specializes in these types of things is essential here. The best way to hold the title is often through a limited liability company or LLC. That's what our group has done. This protects yourselves from personal liability. So if you set up an LLC, you also have to put together what's called an operating agreement. This document will be your shield and your guiding light, so to speak, for how you will run this partnership. And you have to cover everything with no ambiguity here. So you will talk about ownership structure, which includes exactly what percentage each owner has within the LLC. You will spell out financials for who pays for what up front and how you will handle future expenses like property taxes, insurance, lease fees, or maintenance, things like that. You also at this point are going to want to set up a joint banking account specifically for the LLC for all of your hangar-related expenses. You should spell out usage here. Who gets how much space and how are you going to manage that access? And if you try to take on a renter or sublease part of that, how do you make those decisions on who will be your renter and how much are you going to charge them? Those are things you should put in there as well for how you will come up with those understandings. And one of the absolute most critical clauses you can put in here is called a buy-sell agreement. What happens if one of you wants to get out of this agreement, you lose your medical, or heaven forbid, one of your partners passes away? If you got clear buy-sell provisions that detail what this process will look like and how you share the value of the hangar itself, this will help tremendously. Without this, you might be trapped in some legal nightmares with either your partner, if you guys have a falling out, or an heir that you didn't necessarily choose that has other ideas for what to do with their loved one's share of this LLC. So have those things figured out well in advance. Now, ultimately, sole ownership versus a partnership is a personal choice. I just know that for my group, this was the best possible option for us. We were able to buy this hangar together, and because when we bought it, it was a tin shell, we planned specifically that we were going to do some remodeling. We budgeted, we planned, and we were able to share those expenses, and now we have a hangar that we are really, really proud of. We also did our homework, and we found a attorney who is familiar with aviation, familiar with working with, for us, the Metropolitan Airports Commission. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second as far as leasing with your airport, but someone who's knowledgeable in all those different processes to help us go through the mountain of paperwork that it takes to make this happen. So again, it's important to do your legal homework up front, and if a partnership can be a fantastic way to go about getting all this stuff taken care of. All right, so we've got the hangar we're looking for. We have our partners. So what's next? You're going to obviously have the portion where you're going to come to terms with the person you're buying from, but you also have to understand, what are you buying in the first place? You're probably really excited to get this deal done, get into your brand new hangar and make it your own, but you got to pump the brakes just a little bit here. This is a time where I want to stress the importance of doing your due diligence. And this is probably going to be a very important step for you because even though it might just be a hangar, you're buying way more than just a tin shed. And it's sometimes a little bit of a disconnect for people of, well, I'm not buying a house. So they don't necessarily think of the same things you may want to think of when you're buying a house, like inspections. So here's what we did. You do have a couple options. You can either physically inspect the hangar yourself, and if you're knowledgeable enough, that's great. But you should really pay attention here to make sure that you're not going to inherit a problem that they've put off, and maybe that's why they're getting rid of it, that might cost you a lot of money later. Here's some things that I would recommend paying really close attention to. I think something pretty important for the basic operations of a hangar is an operating door. Obviously, your hangar door is going to need to be operational if you want to get your plane in and out of there. So you want to figure out what kind of door is on this hangar in the first place. Is it bifold? Is it a slider? Is there a motor on it or is there not? And if so, what is the condition of that motor? How about counterweights or the pulleys that will help operate that in the first place? So those are things you should pay close attention to. You need to check the condition of those cables, check the condition of the motor, and just keep in mind that a major door repair can easily run you into 5 figures pretty quickly. Next, I want to talk about the roof. You should look for any signs interior if you can, of any signs of leak, rust, or especially where they have the screws that go into the rafters and the framework. Is there anything that looks like there's water standing on those timbers? Something else to be mindful of with the roof is, what does it look like where the roof line meets the exterior walls in the first place? Is there a lot of gapping in there? Sometimes there is some natural gapping for ventilation. However, there's other times where gaps can occur between the exterior wall and the tin roof itself that can be an avenue for rain or snow or what have you to get into your hangar and cause water where you don't want it. We had the experience where on one of the corners there was a little bit of separation between the roof line and that exterior wall, and we figured that out as we got a bunch of snow, we ran the heat, and it melted down into our hangar. So it wasn't a huge issue, but over time that could cause you problems. The next thing I would mention is the structure itself. Check the exterior and interior for any signs of rust or corrosion, and then also where your steel meets the concrete. Is there any big sections where there's gaps there for rodents or precipitation to get into your hangar? Another thing that we ran into here, and this is common at my airport at least, is the trusses on some older hangars. If you don't have great drainage in the area that your hangar is at, the bottom of those posts can start to rot out. And that's a problem that we ran into when we were starting to do our remodel. We found probably 4 or maybe 5 of these larger timbers that at the bottom had started to wear away and rot a bit. And these things are really important because that's what's holding up our roof structure above us. So that was an expensive fix for us that wasn't caught on our inspection. So my guidance to you is make sure you're looking at the bottom of those larger support beams to make sure that you don't have any type of wear or tear that's going to cost you a lot of money down the road. So let's talk next about the floor. Depending on the climate that you live in is going to depend on how you're going to look at this flooring. Major cracks, spalling the concrete, or any other issues with your concrete foundation or flooring can cause you a lot of problems down the road, whether it be through improper drainage or in colder climates, sometimes heaving that can cause cracking on the interior of your floor. So look for any of those types of things. And as long as we're talking about drainage, you want to maybe look outside to see if there's areas where water is going to obviously pool. At some point between our hangar and the one next door to us, someone put down a bunch of concrete. So the vast majority of hangars at our airport, the spaces between the two hangars is either just bare dirt or people have put rock down for drainage, but not a huge slab of concrete. So the problem we have is the water pools there in the winter. So we have been proactive and we have to actually snow blow out the water there so that it doesn't end up causing us issues draining into the hangar when it does melt. And the last thing for things you want to look at is your utilities. Do all the lights and electrical seem to work? Is your electrical panel modern? Is it safe? Or are there issues with it? If there's a bathroom or running plumbing, are there any issues there? And if you have other utilities like heat or air conditioning, do those work properly? The problem that we had with our heater is that it was leaking carbon monoxide into our hangar. So when we started remodeling, that could have been a really big problem if it wasn't properly addressed earlier. So that is something that we were able to mitigate and ultimately replace the furnace itself because of the issues that we had with it. Here's my big takeaway here. If you're not comfortable with these things, don't just take my word on things you might want to look at. Hire a professional building inspector to do a good inspection of the structure itself and those items we talked about. A few $100 here could save you a heck of a lot down the road. So do that little bit of extra due diligence and make sure that there's not any hidden problems waiting for you to be on the hook for later. Now, this next part is something that some people don't necessarily think about. Yes, you may have just bought a hangar or you're about to buy a hangar, but what about the land underneath it? Is that your land now, or does this belong to the airport? Many times, you're going to have to figure out and wrap your head around airport ground leases, where you might own the structure on top of it, but the airport land belongs to the airport. This can be one of the most misunderstood parts of buying a hangar, and it was for me. That's why it was important for us in this case to work with an attorney who is familiar with the process with our local airport commission. Now, if this is the circumstance at your airport, what you're doing as you buy the building, you're buying the structure, but you're not buying that land. What you're doing is you're taking over the lease for that ground that the hangar sits on from the seller in what's called an assignment of lease. At least that's what it's called in our state. Skipping this step or getting it wrong might cause you a lot of heartburn and be an expensive mistake. Okay, so your mileage might vary on this next part, but how long is the lease term that you're taking on? Is this a multi-year lease, or is this something that you have to renew annually with your airport commission? It just depends on what their circumstances are, so make sure that you work with your attorney and know what the fine print is here. How about assignment of the lease? Believe it or not, most airport commissions do have the authority to approve who the new leasee is going to be, i.e. you. So find out what that process involves, and don't just assume that it's a guaranteed yes. Do your homework here. You need to understand if your commission has any type of reversion clause where they will decide possibly what could happen when your lease is up, or if at some point in time they want to take that land and reallocate it for something else? Is there a process for that? And what are your options legally should they decide that they want to build a huge mega hangar here and now you can't lease that ground anymore? And the other thing to keep in mind is, what are your lease rates and how will they increase over time? Fortunately, I'm able to keep up with what the projected increases are going to be for a few years out at a time with our airport commission, because it's based mostly by that commission that sets those in advance. So I can go through, look and go, all right, it's going to be a 3% increase next year, for example. So I can then do that math and figure out, how is that going to impact our finances into the next year? Is there anything that we need to adjust? Finally, with your airport commission, is there any type of use restrictions? Most airports, if not all, have some kind of restriction that these structures need to be used for aeronautical purposes. That means that I can't just run an auto repair shop or a record studio out of a hangar at the airport. Our lease at least spells out that there has to be some type of aviation activity there, and we're also required to provide a tail number of an aircraft that's there. I will say that from my experience at some airports I've been to in our area, if they have a tail number, even if the plane is in a million pieces and they try to run a carpet business out of there, that can and does happen on occasion, but our airport commission also has the ability to request inspections of your hangar to see if you are in fact using it for proper purposes. So another thing to keep in mind is whether they have those inspections of your hangar to make sure that you're abiding by those use restrictions. So all things you want to keep in mind with the airport commission that you might be working with or the airport authority to make sure that you understand what that all looks like. All right, so you're almost done here. We have a little bit more homework to do as far as navigating the purchase itself. You should at this point have a rough idea based on your inspection and working with the airport to figure out what you have in store for you as far as this purchase is concerned. Now it's time to make this deal happen. This is not just a DIY project, so make sure that you're working with professionals that understand how this works to protect yourself. Again, we worked with an attorney who is very well versed in this type of stuff. I suggest you do the same. We worked up with our attorney a legally binding purchase and sale agreement. So for our agreement, this included a closing itself, not in the traditional sense you might think of with a house, but it was an agreement on how much we were going to pay, the method in which we were going to pay, contingencies on if it was approved by the airport commission or not, as well as how and when we would take ownership of the hangar and any risk of loss between the time that we came to an agreement and the time that we took possession. All right, so now that we've come to an agreement on how and when we're going to buy this hangar, I'm not going to get too into the weeds on how you plan on paying for this hangar. Your finances are your business, really. But no, there are a lot of different options as far as whether you're going to pay cash, take out a loan. That's something you should work out with a financial expert who is definitely not me. So let's jump into the what happens now that you've purchased this hangar. You've closed the deal, you have the keys, you're not quite done yet. This is going to be an ongoing process for you for quite some time. So think about the long game from day one to help protect that investment. The first order of business here is insurance on your hangar. There's a lot of different outfits that will offer this type of insurance specifically for aviation hangars. I would suggest looking out to a broker that specializes in that type of thing to help you figure out what your aviation insurance needs will be. Things that you're going to want to and need to cover in your policy are going to be the building itself, the contents that are in it, and if you have any plans of renting that hangar out or putting someone else's plane in there, you need to make sure that there's some sort of clause in there as well in case there's a catastrophic mistake that causes them to lose their aircraft in your hangar. You don't want to be on the hook for that if there's insurance that will cover it. Next up would be the property taxes itself. You remember that one time when I said that you're going to own the structure itself, but more often than not with your airport, the land will belong to the airport or an airport authority or commission. Well, guess what? You still get to pay property taxes more often than not. So as is the case in my situation, we had to go and report the sale to the county in which the airport is in, and we are now assessed property taxes twice a year that we are responsible for, not the airport. Setting that up and getting the paperwork to where it needs to go with your county is important to make sure that you're not skipping on property taxes inadvertently. And the next steps, just like buying a home, if there are any utilities like electric or plumbing or gas to your hangar, make sure that you get that stuff all transferred over so that you're able to pay those and utilize those great services. For our hangar specifically, we're fancy. So we have a heated and insulated hangar at this point. So we have electric, we have gas that runs the heater, and we also have internet in there. And that internet is not just to stream Netflix. It's nice to have that because a lot of times you are in a tin structure. Your cell phone service might not be the greatest. So having internet service within our hangar allows us to connect our phones or connect our iPads so that we're able to do some pre-flight with ForeFlight or whatever app that you're using and have the internet to be able to pull that information onto your device. So when it's time to sit down and start thinking about your annual expenses, make sure that you're thinking about not just those utilities, but what is your annual lease to your airport commission, what is your insurance, and what are some other operating costs. And you also probably want to have some set aside for kind of a contingency for if you have to do some type of maintenance. So for us, we have a set dollar amount that we will leave in the account to make sure that if we have some type of maintenance that needs to be done, we're able to take care of that. So we don't pay ourselves first. We make sure that the account has what it needs to keep the hangar operating. Now, while our hangar is not set up necessarily to generate a ton of income, we do have a renter within our hangar as well. So that's a whole other topic as far as how to go about doing any type of subleasing that I would again suggest you work with an attorney to draft any sublease agreement so that you don't get burned inadvertently by trying to do a favor for a friend, because those types of things can and do sometimes go south and can not just ruin friendships, but can also cause you a lot of civil headaches in court down the road if there's things that are not being paid. The other thing, if you do decide to sublease, make sure that as you're going through your costs, that you're splitting those costs fairly. If you've got multiple tenants, make sure that you have a clear and fair system to split up those utilities and bills so that you're not having one person shoulder more of the responsibility for the payments of certain things than another. Try to be a good steward and a good hangar owner for your renters. And something to keep in mind here too is that with the hangar shortage we talked about, you're likely going to have a line of people waiting for spots in the first place. So just be mindful of that. Know who you're getting into business with before you do so, and just make sure you do the right paperwork to keep things on the up and up so you don't get yourself burned or into some type of legal bind later down the road that you don't want to be in. The last bit of insight that I'll give, just again from personal experience, is if you're planning to do any type of remodeling, try to come up with a plan and a budget for how you want to do that and what happens in what stages. This is going to be really, really important, and it's going to save you a little bit of your sanity if you do it right. I would suggest look at the structure itself. If there's any structural things to take care of, do that first, and then you can move towards the cosmetic things. But do them in stages, do them in manageable little chunks, because it is really easy to look at an empty tin shed and have all these hopes and dreams and get a little overwhelmed by it if you're not careful. So that's why I say it's important, and especially if you have partners, sit down, make sure that you're all on the same page, and start to slowly bite away at that elephant, as they say, taking on one little project at a time so that it's not so daunting. Okay, so I know that was a ton of information, and even just listening to it, you might be overwhelmed a bit, but this is 100% doable. People do this all the time. Just be very intentional with how you go through these steps, and just get with an experienced team of professionals to include legal and tax experts so that you can work through this with competence. I will tell you that from firsthand experience, owning a hangar, even though it's a big responsibility, can be really, really rewarding. To have that freedom, to have your space with your aircraft, to be able to hang out with your partners or with your friends at the airport, and truly make that space your own. Even if you're buying a fixer-upper that's going to take a lot of work, I promise you that in the end, it will be worth your time and investment. As I close things out, if you enjoyed this episode, I hope that you will give me a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you leave me a 5-star rating and if you leave a review, I'd be happy to read your review on a future episode. And those things, believe it or not, even though people don't like hearing this, do help the algorithm to get our podcast into more ears. And if you have an idea for a future episode or you'd like to be a guest, don't have the new email set up yet, so you can still reach out to me at flythetransition@gmail.com or flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com. Either of those will work, and just tell me that you want to be on the AeroExploration Podcast and what you might want to cover. Thanks again so much for taking some time out of your day to join me on this episode. This is AeroExploration, and we'll see you next time.